So maybe we can start by introducing yourself and what you're doing and what your organizations are doing a little bit, so the people are not really familiar with what you're doing, get an overview. So let's start with Rowan.
Sure. So I'm Rowan, I'm the CEO of the DPP. If you're not familiar with the DPP, we are an industry organization. It was described yesterday to me as a movement, which I absolutely loved. But we would describe ourselves as an association of about 500 or so media and technology companies. So major broadcasters and streamers across Europe, the UK, the US, and many, many of their technology providers and service providers, including many companies represented in the room.
And JT, I know hockey.
Yay, Team Canada. Thanks. I'm JT. I'm the CEO of the Streaming Video Technology Alliance. That's the SVTA. We are a global technology movement. And I'm taking that word now.
It's good, isn't it?
Now, we're a technical association. We develop guidelines, best practices, specifications, and to help basically the industry solve challenges related to delivering high-quality video streaming at scale. So our member companies we largely have a technical audience, so the folks that participate in ITF and W3C and CTA Wave often participate in SVTA. Folks all the way from Netflix down to small startups. They all come together into working groups similar to other SDOs, even though we're not an SDO, to help deliver documents and software code that we give away free, so you don't have to be a member to get the stuff that we produce. You just have to be a member to come and participate.
Thank you. And JT, how do you see the state of the media technology landscape today, and what is your view based on what you heard today and what you're doing in SVTA? How do you see the state of the media technology stack?
It's a mess. Does anybody disagree with me? It's a disaster. People are basically putting things together with duct tape and bubble gum because they have to support commercial operations, right? They're in a streaming operator, and they're like, I got to make this work. Let's build some middleware to make this work, even though that's really not a great idea. So we are at a stage where we're trying to get better. There's more collaboration happening. There's more inter-association collaboration happening in order to sort of fix this interoperability problem. And you can't go build a television station without it adhering to all these standards. Anybody can create a video streaming tech stack. And so it's all software-based, and it's based on top of other standards. And so we're getting better, but it's still messy.
From your point of view, Rowan, maybe a little bit more upstreams, media supply.
Yeah, I mean, we deal primarily in sort of technology strategy kind of conversations. So, just to sort of build on what JT said about SVTA, we would tend to be sometimes a little bit upstream of that, and certainly a bit more in kind of like the technology direction conversations, less of the detail of implementation. If you think the technology is kind of a mess, I think that's probably because quite often the strategies that lead towards it are a mess. I had an executive of a very large media organization in the US say to me in February that if it looks like we don't know what our strategy is, it's because we don't. I mean, he was, being a little flippant, but I think that is often true, right? We're being very reactive to how the market is changing, and so the technology is changing. The thing I would say, though, the other thing I've observed a lot in the industry recently is the gap between the technologies and the tools that we're talking about and what we're actually spending time on. So yes, everybody today has mentioned AI. I'll do it for the first time in this session. But actually, we did a survey of 26 CTOs of major media companies in October last year. Guess what they're all spending their money on? They're all spending it on transition to cloud, adoption of SaaS, all the things that we were talking about 3 years ago that we're no longer talking about because they just feel like part of every day. But it's actually where all of the time and money is going.
We're still talking about transition to IP.
Right.
How long are we talking about? 30 years, 20 years? Yeah.
Completely.
So where do you see the biggest innovation happening in the tech stack today in the media flow that is maybe not getting the attention it deserves? Or where do you see innovation happening in the tech media chain today?
Can I take that in a totally different direction? I'm going to say we are too focused on squirrel. innovating too much. Shiny object syndrome. We all focus on it, and what we should be focusing on in industry is optimization. Right, we should be focusing on the things that we have that work well rather than the next iteration. I mean, just look at codecs. Codecs are a crazy, messy disaster, and you've got now multiple codecs you need and bifurcated and complex workflows. Like, how do we reduce that? How do we deprecate technologies that we don't really need and focus in on those that are truly effective? Like, look at Mock. Mock could be a very, very effective piece of the streaming tech stack, and it's innovation, but it's actually building on top of something that was already innovated, which was quick. And so it's really interesting to see this focus on optimization and less on innovation.
So what do you want to deprecate?
I will not comment on stage about that.
Maybe Rowan can do it.
Well, so I think we often, not to get too existential and linguistic about it, but I think we too often confuse invention and innovation. Actually, like, optimization is a really good example of innovation, where it's done well. You asked kind of, I think, what's happening that is maybe flying under the radar or not getting enough attention. I was tempted to say, have you heard about this thing called artificial intelligence? But actually, it's the upstream stuff is really genuinely where I think stuff is going under the radar. So this can include a bunch of AI, but it's not so much the technology as the use cases. The Meta presentation about lip sync dubbing earlier is a really great example, right? We're taking technology that is right on the cutting edge, and who's getting it? It's not major global media organizations. It's every one of us as consumers with a device in our pocket. When I look at what's going on with the creation tools in Instagram, in TikTok, in CapCut, that, I think, is an area that we're not paying enough attention to, because I think the whole process of creating media is getting completely transformed, and we're all focused on the stuff way downstream, which is understandable. It's it's where the money gets made. But I think if I look at the stuff that is gonna be more revolutionary than we realize, it's right at the start of the chain.
Is it also creating media, or adapting media, localizing media, or are we even going into the creating media section in this? Or
I think it's a long time before we're seeing full, like, narrative bits of media entirely created by AI. I'm not sure anybody desperately wants that. Buzz Hayes, the media CTO at Google Cloud, said to me recently, I don't have a single customer who wants to click a button and create a movie. And I think that's right. People don't really want to do that. But they do want to make it an awful lot easier to turn an idea into something that is just distributable. And we're seeing that happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of these use cases, I think, that get overlooked as being real applications, innovative applications of technologies. So we talk about AI, but all the AI we're talking about is it going to make our next movie? Instead of what Jordy really talked, which is an absolutely amazing implementation of what AI is really good at. And not only that, but you can see it in operational tools. And so AI gets its light, gets its time in the light, but I think for the wrong reasons. We're not looking at it as, wow, this is a really great technology for enablement and improvement and optimization of different parts of our workflow. And I think that kind of gets overlooked.
I fully agree. I think that's where we see it. Okay, JT, if you could re-architect the part of the media supply chain and the media technology chain, what part would you re-architect?
Oh, ads. Because I said the streaming tech stack was a big, messy mess. The advertising tech stack is even worse. Yeah, that's the problem. Is again, the streaming video industry has been all about move fast and break things. It's the sort of Silicon Valley tech startup mentality, and that that has left us with what the advertising tech stack is today. And so now that we're like, okay, I think we're kind of at the place where we can really do this well. Let's re-architect it so that's interoperable. There's better interconnection. It's much easier for us to operationalize and manage. And then we'd have a much better way to get ads in and far less fraud potentially in that system.
Yeah, I fully agree, because I usually say that every time I think I understand a tech business, I don't. So I agree with you. What's your view, Ron? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be dull, I would start by seconding that. We just published a report on cloud distribution, and I asked a bunch of people, like, where is the most pain? And ad tech was by far and away the front runner. I think everybody feels just exactly what you've just described. The one that I think is also changing alongside that is data and analytics. I think, to your point about the use of AI and the the bits that get overlooked, I think the ability to interpret and visualize large data sets. Like I've been talking to media companies for years who have been harping on about the need to make better data-driven decisions. And so what they did was to start collecting a bunch of data, and often they still don't know what to do with that data. And so that's something where I think, we are seeing the emergence of a whole bunch of tools that can help with that. I would expect to see big changes there. And if I can be really cheeky and put a third, which doesn't even fulfill the criteria because it's not technology, but ultimately, the biggest thing that's going to get re-architected is the business models around it all. Like there is just so much to be done in terms of how the industry nets out in terms of making money out of content and what the consumer offers should be. So everything flows back to that for me at the moment.
Yeah, well, we talked about, and we got a good exercise by Mike when it comes to standardization and these things, but where do you see the most need for standardization, and where do you see it fall short, that it's not really filling its purpose? Or do we have too many standards, or do we have too many standard bodies? And
Yes.
The above.
So what can we do about that? And what's your take on the amount of standards and the maybe a bit, to be honest, slowness of the standard bodies?
Well, I'll jump in first on this because I think JT probably has more detailed knowledge to add. But for me, I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, there is the difference now compared to a couple of decades ago is the scope and scale of the standards that we need and rely on. So, we're talking here about fundamental internet standards that are to do with the transmission of data around the world and the distribution of video for any number of different use cases. That, to me, is the interesting space around standards. I think the need for professional media industry or broadcast industry specific standards kind of reduces virtually by the day, because I sort of think that things fall into one of a couple of categories. Either there's an awful lot of different organizations or users who need to be able to interoperate, in which case it's more than just an our industry kind of a problem. Or there's a handful of organizations that need to do something together, in which case they probably don't need a standard, they probably just need to get together and agree how to do something. And I'm slightly biased because that's what both of our organizations do a little bit, particularly SVTA. But I think that's the thing, is the traditional standards model within an industry, I start to question now.
Yeah. I mean, I think standards coming over from the TV world, broadcast world into streaming, those work. Codecs, and those are well established, and that works great. But when you start talking about implementing standards in something that's moving so fast, like streaming, it takes 3 years to do a standard. By the time you're done, you're like, hey, we got the standard done. Everybody's like, well, no. We have this whole new technology that we use now, so the standard's just not applicable. Where I think standards are actually helping in streaming is around implementation of processes. So look at the Common Access Token standard. This is a standard that's really changing the way that content delivery networks enable token authentication. And that's really important because before it had just been CDNs were all doing their own thing. And so as a streaming operator, you had to create bespoke systems for your operational management to change tokens and deal with this token and that token. Which CDN am I using? No, I got to use this one. This just fixes that complexity. So any standard within the streaming industry that helps reduce the complexity is a good thing, and there are a few of those. But there's a reason we don't do standards, right? That's just moving too fast. So if you focus on implementation best practices, like here's how you do this. Everybody in the room and decide like the best way to do this. Oh, we've just done a best practice guide. Let's publish that so that the industry can start to gravitate around the best way to do that.
I think the other thing is you need to be honest about where there's real value in having a standard. So canonical example for me is metadata exchange, business to business metadata exchange. When media companies exchange a piece of content, the data that goes with it, for as long as I have worked in this industry, people have been saying that we need better standards around that. And for as long as I have worked in the DPP, people have asked the DPP to do better standards around that. My stock response is there are loads of great metadata standards. If you would like my opinion on which one is the best, we've done a load of work. I will happily give you that opinion. In fact, we even published that opinion. The reality is that nobody adopts the standards that are there because while they recognize that there is a bit of pain in exchanging metadata, they don't really want to change their own internal processes. And it's like adopting a standard has some give and take. You know, you have to adapt your processes to meet the standard. You can't have a standard for the whole industry that is just specifically what you do within your company. That's not really how it works.
No, and I would actually say that that's part of the problem, is that there are so many standards, people don't even know which standards there are in which parts of the workflow, whether it's upstream or downstream. It's like we're working on a project to do a workflow mapping to all the standards and specs across all the organizations. Again, the too many organizations that are out there. But trying to do that mapping so that people will go, oh, there's metadata. I need a metadata, a way to do this. Oh my gosh, there's 18 standards. Oh, which one should I use? But at least they have an understanding that there are 18 standards, and you don't go talk to them and they go, oh, I didn't know there were standards for doing this.
Exactly.
No, but I think the SVT and NRK presentation this morning proves that we can do a lot of things without following the standards. Because if they were waiting for standards, they wouldn't be where they are today when it comes to remote production. So we have a few minutes more left. So JT, what do you think the industry needs to stop doing and instead start doing?
The industry really needs to start rooting for Team Canada all the time. No, I'm just kidding. I think the industry needs to continue to move away from closed, walled gardens, we do it best ourselves, and open up more. And we're seeing this. So, Netflix became a member of the SVTA last year, and that was a big step for them. Went to the HLS event last year in October at Apple's campus, and Roger was talking about how they were open to doing more things with the industry, and let's get the industry to talk about this. And it was, people were like, where, who are you and where's the real Roger Pantos? And so it was this feeling of like, we need to start doing things for the industry as a whole, and part of that is going to be driven by, governmental regulation is going to come to streaming. And if we don't, as an industry, speak up and say, hey, we got this covered, look at these standards, look, we've built all this interoperability, there's no antitrust, it's all this, then otherwise they're going to push standards down on us, and they're probably going to be old standards from the broadcast world way of doing things, and that's just not going to work well for streaming. So we need to open up more.
Rowan?
Yeah, I think we need to stop pretending that the way that every major media organization creates and distributes media is deeply special and different. We all have our own unique organizational challenges, but the sort of the other side of the coin from opening up is being willing to learn from best practice and change the way that we do things based on what we can learn from other people. And I still have a lot of conversations where people tell me that they'd love to do things differently, but they can't because they're special. And they don't usually phrase it quite like that, but that's what they're saying. And I think it's a problem. Like, if we are going to move fast enough, and if we are going to get the kind of efficiencies that we need to have a really not just viable but vibrant industry in 10 years' time, then we've got to be prepared to work together. And that means learning from each other,
And that's one of the value props that we try to communicate to people, is we bring the vendors to the table. Vendors have skin in the game. They want the industry standard to reflect their product. So they come to the table, but sitting across from them are network operators and content owners and service providers. And they're like, hey, okay, let's solve this problem by doing it this way. And somebody across the table goes, well, yeah, that's a really great way to do it, but that doesn't work in my network. Like, we can't implement that. So how about we try to design a little bit better for everybody, and then that vendor gets to take that back to their company and say, hey, product people, can we make these tweaks? And all of a sudden, everybody gets in line. I know that's super utopian ideal stuff, but that's kind of what we try to communicate. Like, that's why you should come and participate.
You got to be optimistic.
Okay, before we break for some well-deserved coffee, you've been around for years and years and years, and you meet a lot of people, you meet a lot of companies, you meet a lot of vendors, tech stacks. If someone would like to start streaming or producing media today, what would be your advice, and how would you guide a newbie in this field?
Are you calling us old? I don't like that. Now, I'm going to say this one more time because of that. Go Team Canada.
The tournament is not over yet.
It is in my mind. I saw one game and they won. I'm done.
I feel really literally stuck in the middle here.
You know, I'd probably advise that media company to take a look at the landscape first, because again, I think we sort of just start running. You know, one of the things that we need to start doing better is including security in every step of the way, and we don't, right? You know, back in the software world, that's what they used to do. You'd build an application, you get at the end, you're like, how do we make this secure? Oh, well, we probably should have thought of that way back then. We're doing that in streaming now. We're doing all this workflow and all this production, and we get to the end, we're like, how do we secure this? Whoops. So we need to, at every step of the way, ask ourselves, how is this secure? How is it secure on the network? How is it secure from outside access? How is it secure here? Are the APIs secure? You know, if we're doing internal APIs, how are these things taken apart from the network? All of those questions we need to ask at every step of the way. So that's probably the advice I would give them is think of security first and then build your workflow on top of it.
Rowan, give the advice to the audience now.
Yeah, so I'll give one piece that I kind of reflected on from the presentations today, actually, and one that I'd thought of in advance. So if I go back to the first presentation today, Dine, I think there was a really good lesson from that, which is absolute clarity of vision and purpose. You know, why start a new sports streaming service? Do we really need another one? And there was a really good answer to that as to, yes, we think we do, and here's what the value proposition is. I think, you know, it's sort of obvious, but actually we see people fail to do it far too often. Is just be really clear about what you're trying to achieve, what the value proposition is. And then the sort of the slightly more kind of technical piece under that is, don't assume that anything is going to look the same in 5 years' time as it does now. You know, we are in a period of pretty rapid change. So to your point about designing with security from the start, I would design with flexibility and agility from the start. Design on the basis that a bunch of your assumptions will prove to be wrong in future, and you need to be able to adapt and change at any point along the way.
Excellent.
Can I add something about the cards I put on
I
people?
was about to say that people are probably sitting on cards now that deserves an explanation.
Yes, if you saw a card, I see some of them people put up there. The SVTA is running a low latency streaming survey. So again, we give everything away. So we're going to publish the results probably in summer. Just snap a picture of the QR code on the front, answer the survey questions. If it's not applicable to you, if you're like, I don't know, low latency streaming, this is not part of my job. But a colleague is back at the office, just take the card back with you. So we want to get as many responses as we can. So if you can participate and contribute, thank you so much.